Hi everybody, welcome back to Flames Pyro Art for Beginners, and today we're going to make a start on the lotus flower to do some basic shading techniques. So I thought with this flower it's got lots of opportunities for us to create some shading and depth and have a look at some of the basics involved with pyrography shading. There's a variety of tips you can use. I use the Optima wood burner. There's a range of shading tips that the Optima does. To start with today, I'm going to be using the medium space shader, but I will be utilising the extra small space shader as well, and we may have a look at the spoon shader a little further down the road with the piece. Now what I wanted to do ideally was, yes, we've got this reference photo of the lotus flower, but I wanted to try and disregard a lot of the image and just open our minds and come up with our own creations of shading. And you know, we're not looking to make all the little lines and the petals perfect and have an exact replica of this lotus flower. It was purely for the petals, and so we could show shading and curvature and some depth. And there's, as we see, there's many different layers. There's a petal here, and then behind it there's another petal, and there's an opportunity there for some shading to curl that petal. There's other petals obviously in the background, as we see, you know, and then it all comes to this central point of the flower, so we can work our way round through all the different areas of all the petals and just experiment and see what our own minds come up with. You know, we don't have to stick rigidly to the patterns, they're just there for guidance. Now I'm setting off on heat setting just under 2 to start the shading of the petals, because with shading techniques you don't want to burn too heavily too quickly. Shading is all about layering and patience. If you want to, you know, build a shape and some contour to it, then you can't rush in on a high heat setting. You need to take your time, start off on a low heat and build your way up to that shade that you're looking for. So today we'll have a look at some of these main petals. Further into the videos we're going to have a look at some what we call negative wood burning, which gives art more realism. So we'll have a look at that in a future video. As you can see from what I'm doing with the pen at the moment, I'll turn my lamp on and see if it helps. I'm not putting down much shading. It's one of the secrets to shading and adding shape and contour is starting off gently and lightly, as you look to capture the shape. So for example, this petal would be curling round a little at the edges, so we could show that by shading up to a graphite line. Remember, these graphite lines we will remove later down the road of the piece. These are purely just like for boundary lines, you know, we don't want to go over that line for each petal. It just sets a boundary edge. We've got a dog hair on there. Pen. We've got 4 chihuahuas and they like to share the hair with us. We're always covered in, my wife calls it chihuahua glitter. When you have 4, well, we've got 3 long-haired chihuahuas and 1 short-haired. And we're always, all of our clothing's just always covered in dog hair, but we don't mind because we love animals. Through the lockdown and the way things were, our dogs became sort of like our children, where unfortunately we couldn't have. My 2 young men now come and stay with us as my wife is battling some illnesses that's been ongoing for some time, so we've had to been shielding a lot. Anyway, back to this wood burning. So when we've got these, like when we marked out the petals, when you think about how the flower would look, as this petal is lying in front, like nearer to the eye than this petal, it would stand to reason, wouldn't it, that here, down in this corner, there would be a little less light, you know, it would be a slight touch darker, wouldn't it? As the shadow that's cast from this petal hits the petal next to it, and that's where you can start adding all your magical depth and shape, just by opening your mind and experimenting and, you know, trying to think, how would the light cast, how would it all look, you know, if this was a real flower? How would her eyes see it? How would the shadows and shade of everything all add to the shape? We'll turn this up to heat setting 2. Now this pen, because we are burning very lightly. But with this main front petal, it's also curving over, so we can give it some curvature. But as I say, the secret is not to turn the heat up too high. Have some patience and build your way into the piece. Obviously everything will go much darker as you go, and you may think to yourself, why didn't I just crank the heat up in the first place. You would be missing the opportunities for all the layering and all the depth if you were to just crank the heat immediately up to a high setting. And we've got all the time in the world to create a pyrography art. There's no time constraints. If you want to develop your skills, seriously, and you want to create realistic looking art, then you have to be prepared to be patient, put the time in to learn the key skills, and just be prepared that it's a journey. It's a journey I'm still walking, and I think all pyrography artists are still always walking and learning and finding out new techniques from others, and exploring new techniques with the wood burning, because as my slogan says, every hour of burning is an hour of learning, and it truly is. Every hour we spend with a pyrography pen in our hand is an hour of learning in the bank, and we can find new ways of doing things, different ways of doing things. The way I like to teach is through patience, and I'm a burn low and slow wood burner, and I just think it gives you far better results at the back end of your artworks. Let me just turn the heat up just a touch more now, only because I don't think you're going to be able to see much of my shading, as I'm doing it very lightly at the minute, building that depth, taking the first steps from my mind's eye to try and see what I'm trying to capture on the wood canvas. I know for me personally, say if I was to do a commission for somebody, possibly the first 2 to 3 days for me are all about connecting with the piece of art, and trying to absorb it into my mind's eye, what it is that I'm trying to create and how I'm going to create it. So that's why I say pyrography is very much about patience. Now at the base of this petal, if we want it to be curling, underneath at the bottom here would be its darkest tone, as there's less light getting down, tucked as it's coming out from underneath the center of this beautiful lotus flower. And there's a range of shaders you can use. You could use like a flat round to do this. So there's an extra small space shader that the Optima do. Many tips can be shading tips. a lot of them are multi-purpose, and as you experiment with your tips more, you'll find that they can do so much more than just, let's say, a ball tip. You know, for writing, it can have so many more uses than just a writing tip. But you'll only find that out by using it, practicing with it, and seeing what results it gives you. And I see quite a lot of people in the Facebook groups ask about shading techniques and say they struggle to grasp the concept of shading. So this video series is hopefully to help those pyrographers who are wishing to open up the world of shading and shape and contour. And like I said, just the secret is turn that heat down, give yourself the opportunity to see in your mind's eye. I mean, I could absolutely fall in love with burning this flower and spend a couple of days burning it, you know. Just love to try and create more depth and more realism and more beauty by taking the time and care. Not rushing the piece, just enjoying my wood burning. And that's what this passion for our hobby, isn't it? Is enjoyment. It gives us therapy. You know, while we enter the zone of creating art, it is a sort of meditation process that goes on as your mind empties and you just get into the zone of the piece of art, and nothing else exists apart from you, your pyrography pen, and the wood canvas. And that's when you will create your most magical pieces. So I'm still very much at the moment building that depth from underneath. I'm using like 3/4 of the sort of the edge of the pen, and I'm pulling up in the shape that I want to go in, which is a flick, isn't it? I want to flick it over this petal, and as I keep layering, this front petal, it will start to take shape. Whereas if I turn that heat up to say setting 4 or something, I would get there too fast. I wouldn't be able to absorb the heat into the wood, you know, and get that depth into the wood. Wood is So it's got magical properties, and it absorbs the heat and depth. As we keep going over and over an area, it seems to like absorb into the wood, and it gives us so many different looks. And if you think about the edge of this petal, it's going to sort of curl round, isn't it, a little bit? So to show that we would go darker around its outside edge, to show there's some curl there. We're still focusing on building that bottom. I did a practice burn of it the other day with the extra small space shader, and I found I had my heat setting too high and basically couldn't capture the look I was going for. The heat was just too high from the start, and it was just going nowhere. So I've learnt the lesson. Build it gradually. Or possibly time-lapse some of this wood burning. I hate to time-lapse, as you can't really see what the person's doing, can you, when it's just a speeded time-lapse. But I appreciate people will not want to sit through a couple of days of me enjoying myself wood burning a beautiful lotus flower. So we're still at the bottom, we're still pulling that depth out. And shading is all about layering. You can ask like graphite pencil artists. They don't, just put one layer of graphite down. There's many layers gone on top of each other to give the look. And that's basically what we do with a heat pen. We build layers of heat on top of each other until we get the desired effect that we're looking for. And by having that heat setting lower, it gives us the opportunity to spot that perfect moment when we found that perfect shading that shows our wood burning off at its very best. So with round the edges here where I'm adding shading, I'm giving the effect that this isn't a flat petal, that it's bowl shaped. So we need to push the edges back and have the middle bit, wherever the highest point is, sat forward. So we're looking to push areas of the petal back and down. And then with the graphite transfer method that I use with a homemade piece of A4 printer paper with a soft B grade, either graphite stick or say a 5B pencil, and basically you just layer up and up and up over that piece of printer paper, place it face down on your wood, put your image over the top where you want it to go, draw around your outlines of your image, and you'll get this very easy to erase graphite outlines. As I may have said in earlier videos, I remember my early days where I first started doing pyrography, and I bought these big multi-packs of carbon paper, and what was this? It was wax carbon paper, and I'd spend all these hours or days or weeks or whatever working on trying to improve my skills, and come the end of it I had these outlines and they just wouldn't budge. You get the rubber on them, you get the, you know, the like sort of sand eraser on them, still wouldn't budge. And the only way to remove them was to get sandpaper out basically and sand down past them. So I quickly learnt the lesson: carbon paper, unless I'm burning very dark over the top of it, not the wax stuff, I don't use the wax stuff anymore, but old pieces of carbon paper that I'll use for lettering sometimes, only if I'm going to be burning very dark over the top. Other than that, I use the graphite paper transfer method. And we've done the edge of that petal. I'll just show you quickly. Now it looks darker at the moment than what it actually is, but it erases so easily. I mean, this isn't a very harsh rubber, but it removes the graphite so easily. It's gone. That was a tip given to me by my wife. She's a amazing graphite artist. If you check out Dee Dee's art, that's my wife's art channel, and she's a very gifted pencil artist. She uses the graphite, well, I think actually she's telling a lie, I think she has a light board now for the outlining. You know, some people may debate outlining is cheating, but it's not. It's just setting boundary edges. The skill is filling in, isn't it? You know, anybody can outline, the skill is filling in side the outlines. There are teachers like Daryl Tank, who's an amazing artist. I don't know what mediums he uses. I know he's a pencil artist as well. I don't know if he does paint, but he uses sometimes a grid method where he measures everything, you know, and basically lays down a graphite grid and measures everything up. But it's so much easier just to outline using this graphite method. Just saves you hours and hours of messing about lining up. Make life a little easier. There's a world of transfer methods out there, and I'm not saying my method is the best. It's just the one I prefer, because I can easily erase the graphite. Okay, so we're slowly starting to build some shape to this front petal. Right down in here is its base. Because in the end, what we will do with this piece, we'll have clean edges to each petal, which will make it look even more special. Call it clean edges to value. If you were to look at an actual lotus flower, it wouldn't all be blurring. But it, you know, each individual petal would have a clean edge. How long have we been running? 32 minutes. I'm going to keep this session at an hour. An hour is more than enough, I know, for people to, maybe it's even still too long for people to sit and watch. This just gives you a feel for what shading is all about. It's low heat, trying to think in our mind's eye how the light would react if we were looking at the real flower. How can we show that bend and curve to a petal? And it's all by pushing things back, bringing things forward. Sticking within the parameters of each petal is important as well. And then we could make a truly magical flower. But it's not going to happen in just a couple of hours. Will be some areas of flower that we won't be burning, you know. They're the areas that'll show at its highest point. and making sure I don't go into either of these other petals either side anywhere else. I don't want to be touching them at this stage. Depending on the size of the flower or whatever you're doing, depends on what tip you can use. So the Optima has a range of tips. I know the Peter Child has a spoon shader. That's great for small work. I haven't used any of the other wood burners, so I couldn't speak as to what the pens are like and what ranges they have. I'm sure they're, for you, they're perfect. Now with this flower, to show that it's got some curve, we can add a shading. It's like a vein in the petal, like a, you know, as the original flower was pink and it had like pink veins sort of running through it. If we add them on a shape, we don't want to put it straight, do we? Otherwise it's flat. We want to think that it's curling. So that middle vein or whatever would not be just straight down, it would come over and round and down. So even just putting that line there can start to show that this petal is curling in. You know, it's going off into the distance, into the pointing towards the centre. And you'll find as your piece of art evolves, all your values, which is all your shading, may and will probably alter. You should start off light, and then as your confidence grows and you see the piece coming to life more, then you start adding more darker shades of burning. Once you know where the areas are that need to go darker, so I'm still looking to wrap this petal around. I know it sits inside this one, so I don't want to, there's a graphite line there, I do not want to burn over that line, otherwise I will lose my clean edge to the value of the petals and it won't have that sharp, crisp, realistic look that I'm striving for. As you get more confident, you can touch the heat up a little. But I'd advise not to go too heavy. Keep the heat under your control and not the other way around. Don't let the heat dictate to you how fast you move and how dark it is. You want to always stay in control of that heat. I've turned the board now. This is another skill you will develop, is working upside down. If I was to burn this corner in for it wrapping round again, if I was to burn it from the other side, my pen would be touching down into this petal or this petal, and any bleed I get coming off from the heat would be going to the wrong place. So you need to move your board round so you stay within the confines of that petal you're working on, if that makes sense. Unless you're working on an extremely large piece of wood, always move your board. You need to be able to burn in the directions that you're trying to show. What time we're on? 42. Let's have a look from underneath here now, see if we can start pulling this out. Moving on an angle. And slight curve. This will all darken up more and more as the burn progresses. Show that darkness and then it coming round into the light, and it's those different depths of shading that gives the viewer the perception of, oh, okay, I can see there's depth to what is essentially a flat piece of wood. Same like other mediums, they don't want the work to look flat, you know, they're always looking to capture depth. That's what we're all striving for, is depth. To make something flat look like it's You know, you can, it looks 3D. You know, you can actually grab it at the back, you know. But to do that takes patience and time. It's not for everybody. Some people may just want to stay as hobbyists and just, you know, just do fun quick burns, which is absolutely fine. And there's no right or wrong way to creating art, there's just your way. These lessons are just to help people who may want to journey deeper into this art form. And learn some of the key skills. As you think with like the veins of different colour in the petals, they all need to be shaped, you know, they all need to go with the shape of the object you're trying to create. If you're showing like a vein of colour running up the side here, you don't just go straight up, you have to bend it. And likewise here, where we're coming near the edge of this petal that sits in front, we know that right down here at its edge is going to be darker because there's going to be shadow casting from this petal sitting in front of it. We have to be very careful that we stay within the confines of each individual petal though. It's such a shame an hour is just scratching the surface of pyrography art. I would love to be able to show you all and take you through the whole of the wood burn of this flower, so you could see it, how it all comes together. I know in reality people just want little snippets of information. Remember, the darker we go, we're pushing it deeper, and then as we shade lighter and lighter, coming back out into the light, it will give that effect that there is a shape to this object. We still have to work on the bottom So it has to go much darker still yet. We don't want to get there too soon. As I said, as a piece evolves, all the values will change. Everything will go darker, but we're just not getting there all at once. Just try and think in your mind again, how would the light show this curling over? For me, it would show darker at its furthest point, coming out to the lighter front of the bowl shape. So this top shading of the petal would be dark at its furthest point, and make its way to the light. Again, we're staying within the confines of them boundary edges. We could remove the graphite really from that other edge in a moment. If we rub that out now, because remember, when you burn over a graphite, it will look darker than what it actually is. Once you rub out the graphite lines, you'll find you're left with a much lighter shade than what you thought you had. So remove the graphite lines. Once you're comfortable with your parameters, remove the graphite, so you're left with a true shade of what it is. And as we gently, so if we need to move the board, as we gently, again here, behind this petal, here, would be coming out from the dark. So we need to ever so carefully not encroach in the other petal. Pull a shading. From the dark edge. And this petal has to be a shade darker than this one to signify that it's sat inside of that petal, if that makes sense. So this is all things we're starting to think about now as we're building our shape and shading. We're thinking how the darkness of shade of this petal will affect that one. and to give depth is the darkest area is the furthest pushed in. And so we want that clean edge. A petal wouldn't be all blurry, would it? It's sharp. You know what I mean? It's got sharp, clean edges. We're coming up on 5 minutes left. I just wish I could just take you through hours and hours of this flower. Wood burning flowers can be so therapeutic and so magical art in itself. You know, a lot of us, we do animals and wildlife and human portraits. Sometimes it's nice to wood burn a really pretty flower. Push ourselves, see what we can do. Remember, every hour of burning is an hour of learning. It truly is. I wouldn't class myself as a master pyrographer. I'm a student. I think it will all remain students. Some are further down the road with their studies than others, but we're all still learning. So never beat yourself up if, say, sometimes you get things wrong. It's not, don't look at it as you've got it wrong. You've found out one way that you don't do it, so it's a success, because you've actually found out, right, I don't do it that way, till you've learnt something. So there's no such thing as failure when creating art. If you do something and it doesn't look right, great, that just means you've found one way not to do it. And you move on to the next attempt. You know, try a different technique, try different shading values, try different strokes, try different pens. All learning. We're coming up on the hour. I know don't seem like we have done much of this first petal today, but just me. This is the background work needed, like, to add that depth to a shading. It takes time, a low heat, patience, and then we can just start thinking in our minds, how would that petal shade as it's shaping in a bowl and curling over, you know, where do I need to add my shading to give the onlooker the effect that this is a bowl shaped petal. So I will time lapse some more of the wood burning of this flower, and I will pick up again a little later when we'll do some negative burning, which again captures more realism to our art, and we'll just see this flower evolve through the stages. So happy burning, everybody. Thank you very much for sharing your valuable time with me today. Leave me any comments or any questions. You can visit me on Facebook on Flames Pyro Art in groups. You're welcome to join the group and show your work, and you know, we can chat about pyrography. So take care, and I shall see you all in the next episode. Bye for now.